Welcome to Mixed Needs Mama podcast, where we talk about parenting mixed needs families and building a family culture that honors God and every member in our family. We're so glad you've joined us today. I'm your host, a mixed needs mama myself, Terrie Hellard-Brown, and I help Christian parents in mixed needs homes move from survival mode to sustainable peace. Today I wanted to talk about respite, and in that, even talking a little bit about medication. I don't know your situation, and honestly, every one of us are dealing with slightly different situations. We have different diagnoses. Even if we all have the same diagnosis of autism or ADHD, they all present slightly differently. Some are more active, more violent, all kinds of things that can be going on in our homes. So I'm sharing with you what I know, what my experience has been, and what I know other people have used to find help when we're dealing with so many situations that cause us to feel emotional, because it is watching our child hurt, watching our child struggle. Sometimes we need a break. We want to remain where we're able to stay regulated emotionally, keep our emotions in check, and be able to parent well. And that means sometimes we do need respite. We do need a break. So how can we find that break? When I was going through parenting, if you've listened to this podcast, you know we were overseas. I didn't have a great support group to fall back on. When my child were very young, before we moved to the mission field, we were in California. So I did have a network there. Most of that was because of their clefts rather than autism or ADD or anything like that, because they hadn't yet been diagnosed that way. But we were dealing with speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and getting lots and lots of surgeries, because that's what happens when you have a cleft. And California was back then set up well for intervening, for giving us respite care, for giving us opportunities. So we went with the March of Dimes for a parenting group. What that involved was the parents would get to meet and discuss what they were going through, what questions they had, and there was a social worker there who would answer our questions and talk with us. They had trained teachers, and I believe they even might have had some physical therapy training or OT training, occupational therapy, but they would have a playtime with the kids. They'd have a story time and they would do exercises with the kids. So that was really amazing, because it was truly a break where I knew my children were getting some care that they really deserved and needed. And I was having a time that I needed to be able to ask questions and get answers and go through talking to other parents who were going through the same thing and understood what we were going through. So that was very beneficial. We had another play group where we were all together, and the kids would have availability to go on trampolines and different things that we didn't have at our house. And we were all there together. So it was a playtime together that offered them some different activities and opportunities to try out some things that would help them with what they needed in their developmental process. What happens when a child has lots of surgeries, often they go backwards for a while in their development and then they play catch up. So if you've had children who've gone through a lot of surgeries or any other kind of traumatic experience, this can happen. And it's normal and it's fine, and they usually catch up just fine. So this was great to have those opportunities for them to get to play on different apparatuses that would help them to develop their motor skills, and they would practice speech and getting to socially interact with other children too, who were in their same boat. And so there was no stigma, there was no problem with that. In one group, we even had children with all kinds of birth defects and issues that they were dealing with in the same group. And that was fun too, because they got to show compassion for one child who was not able to do some of the things they were able to do. And it taught my children compassion. And that was really awesome too. So if you can find these groups through the March of Dimes, through your church groups, through a mommy and me sort of thing in your community, I highly recommend and encourage you to take advantage of those, especially when your children are under 5 years old. One of the main reasons for that is the earlier we start intervention, the better. Whatever their diagnosis, whatever initials go with whatever they're dealing with, it helps to have early intervention. Now, if they are school age, then we work on finding ways that we can either trade with another parent and have that parent and their children stay with our kids for a little while, and then we return the favor. It gives us that moment of respite. And the other thing it gives us an opportunity for is to spend some time with our neurotypical child. It may be that we need to have a play date or just a mommy daddy date with our neurotypical child while our neurodivergent child is with someone else, because that way we can totally focus on that child. Maybe we need to have one spouse stay home with one child and the other spouse go with the other child, and have that date time with each child and then switch so that they get mommy time and daddy time with both child separately. Whatever you need to do to meet the child's needs and to meet your needs. We need to be careful, because when we are a caregiver, when we are going through surgeries or we're working on sensory issues and we're brushing our child or whatever needs to happen to help that child develop a better coping ability and regulation ability with their sensory issues or emotions, we need to recognize that we can burn out and we can be so tired that we're finding it hard to think straight or to self-regulate, to be able to control our emotions. We can even fall into just depression. So we want to be aware of that and take it seriously. We shouldn't have to go there. We shouldn't have to feel hopeless and alone and isolated in our culture today. Too many people know what's going on, and so many people are going through the same thing we're going through. We should be able to find a support group. If you can't, then you can find other ways to find respite, to find a break, so that you can have time alone with your spouse, time alone by yourself, or time alone with your neurotypical child, so that you can really focus on the needs of everyone in your household and in your family. So I would actually love very much to hear what you do when you need respite. How do you get a break in your home? What do you do? If you could put that in the comments under the show notes, it will help so many parents to be able to read your comments and to be able to see what's worked for you. I know what worked for us. And like I said, when they were really young, it was March of Dimes. It was our local cleft group. We had a cleft support group. As they got older, I had friends who were teachers, so they understood how to work with neurodivergent children. And they would come and stay with my kids and help them with their homework. And my husband and I would get a night out as a date night. The problem with it was, because we were overseas, many times they could not even come to our house till like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And we were so tired, we wanted to just go to bed and let them help the kids with their homework and then get them to bed. But we went out and we would just have a really low-key dinner and enjoy some time away. The other thing we can do is help our children understand that everybody's brain, no matter neurodivergent, neurotypical, everybody's brain needs a break. So if we're homeschooling especially, we can have a lot of control over that. So we want to say, okay, every day at 2 o'clock, every day at 3 o'clock, if our children are over the age of nap time, then we want to pick a time when we can have quiet time. And that's where we have sustained silent reading, or they can work on their Legos, whatever it is. Everybody gets to go to their little favorite spot and do their favorite thing so they can play with their Legos. I discourage you from doing screen time for this if possible, because our kids tend to get too much screen time already. But if they don't get any screen time, this might be a time for them to watch a video or enjoy some screen time on your iPad or your computer. That will give you at least a half hour of just doing what you want to do, drinking tea and doing your favorite craft activity, or just sitting on the porch or the balcony and enjoying the sunshine. Whatever it is that you can have that time. The other thing you can do is choose to go to the lake or to the beach or somewhere in nature and have something for each child to do. say we're going to have some fun time hiking and investigating, maybe a nature walk, but we're also going to have our quiet time out here today. This child can go over to this park bench and draw pictures. This one can go over here to this sandbox in the park or whatever and play there. We're going to actually use this time as our quiet time today. Maybe mom wants to just sit in the car and read a book or whatever, but if we're going to do that in nature, of course, we've got to be careful to keep an eye on our kids and know where they are. At home, you don't have to worry about that quite as much. Having that even in a public place where you're all going to do your own thing near each other, but you're quietly working on your thing while the other person is doing their thing, it gives you that break. And we all need that. It gives us a time to be creative, to pray, to just unwind and relax and have those moments where we're not having to focus on a child being overstimulated, another child feeling left out, any whining or anything like that. Of course, if we are successfully teaching our children to regulate their emotions, to learn self-discipline and obedience, the whining should be at a minimum. So hopefully we're working away from that kind of a thing. Now, when we talk about regulation, when we talk about manageability and getting away from just survival mode to thrive mode, many times medication comes up in the conversation. And this is something I personally believe is a personal decision. You need to pray about that. You need to talk with your doctors and really decide if this is something you want to do. You will know pretty quickly what the right choice is if you try medication, because some children actually cannot tolerate it. I had one student who was ADHD, super H, super hyper. He tried every medication available, and it would either send him into an ODD anger mode, I mean, very angry, short-tempered, awful, could not control himself type mode, or he would start getting so depressed we were worried about him. He was much better off of medications because they did not do well with him. He learned to cope in other ways. It was really quite wonderful. He was a pastor's son, and I'm so proud of him. He decided to start his own business. He started mowing lawns, and that gave him that extra energy output with mowing lawns with a hand mower all the time. And so he wound up building this huge lawn mowing business as a young kid in middle school and just did fantastic. He did so well. In class, sometimes I would let him go out and run around the school a couple times and then come back and sit down because his energy would just be so much. Here he was in middle school and high school, and he needed to be able to sit and write an essay or do whatever he needed to do. He wound up being very successful. Last I heard, he was preparing to go to the police academy. He wanted to become a police officer. He was an amazing young man, and I'm so proud of him. I had another student I'm also very proud of who was also super hyper, and he was on medication. And his parents would take him off the medication on the weekend and put him back on it during the school week. So Mondays were always very hard because the medication was not really back in his system yet. So he would tend to be super hyper on Mondays, but the rest of the week it worked really well for him. His parents wanted him to have the freedom to just be himself and be hyper over the weekend. So that's what they chose to do. I have done both with my kids. I've had them on medication. I've had them off medication. For our family personally, off medication has been better. Now, there was an exception to this one medication that my son was on for a while that really helped him focus, helped him not to have anxiety, but it is no longer available. They took it off the market. So that's always something too. The other thing we had happen is they had one medication that caused my son to hallucinate, and it was horrible. It was terrifying for him and for us. It still has affected him. Those hallucinations were so terrifying to him that if he thinks about it, it can even put him into an anxious feeling now. And this is years and years later. So be careful, be informed. Make sure, this is my hugest warning, look at the little information packet that comes with your medication. The one that my child took that he hallucinated with, I found out because I did not read the insert. I trusted my doctors. The insert clearly says this is not meant for anyone under the age of, and it was 12 or 13. And my child was younger than that. I think that may be why he had an adverse reaction. My daughter was older. She took it, did not have any problems with it, except she just hates taking medicine. So we have found for my kids, they have chosen, now that they're adults, to go without medication and to learn other coping mechanisms. It has been a rough road. It hasn't been easy, and we've had to help them a lot to set alarms, to make schedules and stick to them, to make a plan to cope with their anxiety or whatever. They've done relatively well, but it is partly because they have also chosen that route. They have chosen to not go with the medication. So they are determined to do well without the medication. We have at times tried to encourage our daughter to go back on meds because she just has such a hard time. And I think she does much better on the medication. It didn't seem to have the same side effects for her, but she just doesn't want to. I mean, it's not like my children are dealing with situations that really need medication. Often a person who's bipolar doesn't want to take their medication, and they really need it to be able to function and to be successful. When you're talking about mild autism or ADHD, it's a little bit different. They're not needing the medication just to succeed in life and to be able to function in life. It does give them that boost, but I have seen my friends who are bipolar need their medication just to be able to go through the day, just to be able to not go to super hyper manic or super low depressed, but they have a middle of the road functioning level between manic and depressive. So for me, what I have seen with my friends is with a bipolar situation, there's a lot of bipolar in Taiwan. It's really a lot. So I've had many, many friends who have walked this road. They've tried traditional Chinese medicine, they've tried Western medicine, they've tried no medicine, and almost everyone has come to the conclusion that they needed Western medicine, that was what helped them to have a steady ability to manage life. So that's a different situation. And like I said, I don't know what you're dealing with your children, but with mine, it was autism, ADHD symptoms, and they did better without medication. That's where we have to really pray and come to the conclusion of what is right for our child. I would caution you, don't let other people force you to do what you know is not right for your child. We were coerced into medicating our children, and some of the time that worked. We had some really good medication that worked well, and other times, like I said, it was disastrous. Looking at my different students and what they dealt with, I think everyone has to look at their child case by case and figure out what works best. So I would encourage you there. But saying all of that, I would not be completely closed off to getting medication if that's going to help your child succeed, if that's going to help your child do well. Just read the information, educate yourself, and know what you're doing. Then when your child is older, let them decide and let them choose to be diligent on their own to overcome their anxiety or whatever it is. When they're determined to do it, they can do it, but it is not easy. So medication can be a real controversial issue. Some parents I know are like adamant, do not put your child on medication. It makes them zombies. That didn't happen with my kids. They were not zombies. I never saw it calm them down that much to where they were zombies. They were much more able to face difficult situations, to think through the situations. It really worked well with them for a while, the certain kinds of meds. Some of the meds didn't work at all, and like I said, some caused trouble. So we have to experiment a little bit. We have to decide. We have to discern what is best for each child. Sometimes that medication can give you the biggest respite in that you're able to function as a normal ish family where you're not constantly dealing with this emotional roller coaster and it's not so difficult to parent your children. If you're like me, you love the differences in your kids and how interesting they all are and how their brains work is really fascinating. If we can keep that in mind also, just to be in wonder and awe at how their brains work and how they process things and how they see the world, it can be a really fun adventure in parenting our children. But if you have one who is violent and angry and is hurting their siblings, you've got to figure something out. You've got to get professional help, possibly. Talk to a counselor, talk to your doctor, see about medication, but also find out if that child can even tell you what is going on. A lot of times they can't, of course, they don't know why they're doing what they are doing. For instance, with ODD, it's one of the more difficult diagnoses to deal with young children especially. They just are obstinate and do not obey. They don't want to cooperate. But the more we have structure, the more we have clear expectations and clear boundaries, the more they will thrive. Eventually, they will get in line for the most part. But you have to be super consistent and super determined to do the right thing for that child. That child needs more structure than most kids, even though they may bulk at that structure more than most kids. You need that structure. You need to teach them the appropriate way to respond to any encounter with you, to any situation. So we aren't tolerating disrespect. We're not tolerating these outbursts. There are other ways to discuss if you disagree with what we're telling you to do, for you to express that objection in a way that is appropriate. We have to teach our children that no matter what their diagnosis is, or even if they're neurotypical, we still have to explain to them, these are our expectations, these are our rules, and these actions or attitudes will not be tolerated. So if you do show disrespect, you do raise your voice at me when I'm giving you instructions rather than listening to me, this is the consequence. You're going to lose privileges. You're going to sit maybe at the kitchen table. You're going to have them sit at the kitchen table until they're ready to apologize and to listen to what you wanted to say. I was just editing a book and I love what this parent said. This is going to be a great book you guys should check out, especially if you're interested in homeschooling. He talks about discipline and he said, boredom is your friend. Whenever we're disciplining our children and if they're being uncooperative or they don't want to do what we said, make them bored because it will help them to come to the conclusion that they need to obey much faster. And I thought that's really true. That's excellent. So, ways to help you navigate your family and your own emotional health is to find what works for your family. I know this feels like such a cop-out. It feels like it's not really giving you actionable advice, but I hope you see that it really is. It's just we can't say one size fits all because it doesn't. There are ways to find respite. There are ways to find time for yourself and for your children to have their time to themselves. The other part that is so awesome, the reward that you will reap from all of this, is our children need to learn to entertain themselves. They need to learn to be on their own, at least for some time during the day, and to let themselves enjoy what they enjoy, think creatively, problem solve on their own instead of running to you to solve their problem. The more that we intervene when our children are arguing and rescue them out of the situation, or the more that we problem solve for them, the more we cripple them. We don't want to do that. We want them to be able to resolve their own conflicts. We want them to be able to control their own emotions. And we want them to be able to solve, through critical thinking, any kind of problem they face. I can't remember the time, 20 seconds or something, it was not very long. If we will allow our children to think through and struggle with whatever their problem is for a reasonable amount of time before we intervene, often they will find a solution. Often they will solve the problem themselves. We often rescue them and intervene too quickly, and it is not good for them. So we need to find a way to time ourselves, to give them time to work through the problem and really think it through. I don't think we need to say, okay, give it a minute or two, because then if they don't want to work it out, they're just going to watch the clock. We want to say, yeah, that is a problem. What do you think you should do about it? Or give me 2 ideas of what you could do to solve this problem. Think of ways to get them thinking about, hey, I can do this. We might even tell them that you can solve this yourself if you'll just think about it. Why don't you come back and tell me in a few minutes, tell me what you've come up with to solve this problem? Or how did you resolve it? If your children are constantly harassing each other and fighting, that is not the culture we want to develop. We're not going to tolerate that. I would not allow your children to be disrespectful to each other. I would nip that right away. You can also, if you see them escalating, redirect them for a minute or talk to them and get them to stop, then get them to calm down, and then tackle the argument, tackle the problem. When they're not upset, remind them that the more we get upset, the more we start getting emotional, we need to calm down, take a breath, and relax and back off a minute and think about what needs to happen in the situation. You can let them know the minute they go from thinking and trying to reason with someone to just being angry and fighting or yelling, we've lost the ability to think clearly. So we need to stop a second. You can teach them to say, okay, wait, let's stop a second. If they're used to that, not stop, but used to each other saying, wait, we need to regulate, we need to stop, we need to reset. That would be a good one to use with kids. We need to reset. Then we can tackle the problem. And that was the other thing we've said over and over and over in our family culture. We are not attacking each other. We are attacking the problem. So we are on the same side trying to tackle a problem. Even if we feel like this person's saying A, this person's saying B, we need to say, well, then there's a disagreement here and we're going to tackle that problem of whether A or B is better. And then we will come together and maybe we're going to choose plan C. We tackle the problems, not the person. So keep saying these kinds of things and encourage your family to adopt those kinds of attitudes that will then help bring the peace you want in your home, and that will give you some respite right away. We need to find that time for ourselves and for our time with God where we can pray and we can reset our brain and be able to then parent our children well. Again, I hope you'll take the time. It'll only take a minute. If you could go and write down what you have found to help with your children when they're escalating, or how you find a rest time, a break in your parenting schedule so that you can have some time with your spouse or with your neurotypical child. We would love to just have a whole list of items that parents can go to and say, oh, I want to try this one. That would be such an amazing gift if you will take just a moment to respond and to put a comment of what has worked in your family. It would be so beneficial. I hope you'll take the time to share. Thank you for being here today. And as mixed needs mamas, we don't have to take this journey alone. We can take it together with each other and with God by our side and see the gift that God has given us in these wonderful children in our mixed needs family. Before we go, I want to tell you about something I created specifically for the parent who feels like they're barely holding it together. Maybe you're tired of yelling at your kids. Maybe you keep shutting down emotionally because it feels safer than engaging. Or maybe you're just constantly bracing, waiting for the next meltdown, the next conflict, or the next thing to go wrong. I've been there. And I know that when you're in that space, the last thing you need is another long program or another book to read. That's why I created the 7 Days to Fewer Blowups at Home Challenge. This is a 7-day reset, just 7 minutes a day, focused on helping you, the parent, reclaim peace in your own heart and mind. Because here's the truth: we can't lead our families well when we're running on empty, reactive, and internally chaotic. This challenge isn't about behavior management. It's not about controlling our kids. It's about anchoring ourselves so that we can respond instead of react, so we can lead with clarity instead of chaos, so we can actually experience peace in our homes again. You get 7 days of focused, practical content that will help us shift the way we show up in our homes. Head to terriehellard-brown.com and grab the 7-day challenge. Let's do this together.